My name is Emily Meeks, and I chose the election data set for my project. An abstraction is a simplified set of information properties describing data relevant to specific stakeholders. In this project, I abstracted primary election data from CNN's report of the 2016 Democratic and Republican primaries. Properties abstracted include float, percent of vote, integer number of votes, and string party. Percent of vote is needed to determine the frequencies of the percent of votes the candidates received in each primary, as well as the average percent of votes candidates received in swing states. Number of votes and party are needed to determine the number of total votes cast in the Republican and Democratic primaries. List of result is a list of dictionaries that contain information from each primary. Each primary result includes two dictionaries, location and vote data. Dictionary location includes string county, string state, and string state abbreviation. Dictionary vote data includes dictionaries for each of the primary candidates, including the Republican nominee Donald Trump and Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton. Each candidate dictionary includes the integer, number of votes, string party, and float percent of votes. The value of the first dictionary is the key of the second dictionary, etc. For example, if you wanted to know the party of Donald Trump, you would access the vote data dictionary and then the Donald Trump dictionary and then the key party and the value Republican. My first question is, what are the frequencies of the percent of votes for the top two candidates of each party for the 2016 primaries? The specific frequencies are important because whichever candidate with the highest percent of votes for each party generally runs in the final election. If one candidate has the highest frequency, say 80 to 100% of votes, it is likely that he or she will be the party's nominee. There is room for concern if a candidate receives a higher frequency of high percent of votes in the primaries and is not selected as the party's nominee. This may lead to the question, can primaries be rigged? To answer this question, I made 4 histograms. Each histogram shows the percent of votes each candidate received for all the primaries nationwide. There were approximately 650 Republican primaries that reported between 0 and 10% of votes for Donald Trump. Most primaries reported between 20 and 80% of votes for Trump, and the mode was around 50%. For Clinton, the distribution was approximately normal. Approximately 1,100 Democratic primaries reported 40 to 50% of total votes for her. This was also the mode. Over 4,000 Republican primaries reported less than 50% of the total vote for Cruz. The distribution for Sanders is similar to the distribution for Clinton. Around 1,100 Democratic primaries reported 50 to 60% of the total votes for Sanders. If the histograms show that more primaries had higher percentages of votes for Sanders than Clinton, this may indicate that the Democratic primary was rigged in favor of Clinton. My second question is, what were the percent of total votes cast for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in the swing states? This is important because swing states have a lot of electoral votes and they are not usually favored to vote one way or another. It's harder to predict which candidate voters in swing states will vote for. Knowing the percent of total votes for each candidate can be useful in predicting the president-elect. In this case, this is preliminary primary data, when the nominees are chosen, not the actual election. However, it is still interesting to see how the swing states vote in the primaries compared to the actual election. To answer this question, I made 2 bar charts showing the average percent of votes for Trump and Clinton in swing states. In the final election, the electoral votes of all 4 states listed went to Trump. This is different from the primary data in which less than 50% of votes on average went to Trump in Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. In the Democratic primaries, more than 50% of votes on average went to Clinton in the swing states. These data may be misleading because voters could only choose between candidates of one party, not both. This is different in the actual election. Also, the primary data is taken several months before the actual election, and public opinion may have changed. My third question is, how many total votes were counted in the Republican and Democratic primaries? This is important because although candidates of both parties vary in their beliefs and ideas, they usually do not stray far from their party's platform. The total votes cast in the primaries may indicate how many Americans affiliate with each party and their platforms. If one party primary has significantly more votes than the other, it is possible that more Americans identify with that party. The party and/or candidates may change their platforms in order to better represent the views of the majority of Americans. There are also a number of Americans that are not associated with either party. Both parties are interested in these voters and try to persuade them to vote for their candidate. To answer this question, I made a bar chart that shows the number of total votes cast in the Democratic and Republican primaries. Over 27 million votes were cast for Democratic candidates and over 29 million votes were cast for Republican candidates. Some 8,000 voters did not have a preference for any candidate or were uncommitted. This number was too small to be accurately represented as a bar on the scale in this chart. Because swing states often determine the final election outcome, the second question may be used to predict the winner of the final election. However, because several properties are excluded from the abstraction, it is difficult to use the primary results to predict the final election. In this case, since there aren't primaries for independent voters, they may be left out of these data unless they vote for a majority party candidate or vote no preference or uncommitted. These data include information from open, closed, and blanket primaries from all counties in the United States. Voters may vote differently in different types of primaries. For example, an independent voter can vote in an open election but not a closed election. We don't know what types of primaries each county held. While the 2016 primary data determined the party's nominees for president, it did not show how public opinion changed over time. Therefore, this data cannot be used to accurately predict the outcome of the final election. It was also difficult to extract the data to answer the third question because the dictionary vote data is organized into candidate dictionaries. It would have been easier to navigate if vote data had been organized into dictionaries for each party and then for each candidate. Some stakeholders involved are voters, the media, candidates, and their campaign staff/parties, corporate donors, and lobby groups. These stakeholders may use these data to predict who will be nominated to run for election. The data may be of interest to the news media and groups that report and analyze election data, as well as the voters deciding on who to vote for in the actual election in November. Lobby groups and corporate donors may be interested in these data if they want to determine which candidates to influence or donate money to. The data show an inconsistency between the Democratic Party's nominee and the results of the raw primary data. The way that nominees are chosen is similar to the way the Electoral College works. Delegates choose their respective party's nominee. They usually vote for the same candidate their county's majority voted for in the primary elections, but they don't have to. In this way, delegates may select a candidate, in this case Hillary Clinton, that their counties did not. The media may keep candidates honest. For example, sometimes politicians owe groups and corporate donors favors. They may look out for special interests instead of U.S. citizens. A recent example of this is the government support of the Dakota Access Pipeline, even though there have been protests by members of the Sioux Rock tribe. The media reports stories that expose the candidates' ties to the special interest groups.